Greenwood was a peaceful place where everyone knew each other. Alex, a 17-year-old, lived there with his family. He was smart and curious, with a close bond to his father, David, who worked as a sheriff. Halloween was approaching, but something felt off. Alex had been acting distant lately, his usual energy dampened by something he wouldn't talk about. Unbeknownst to everyone, Alex had discovered a terrible secret. One evening, while visiting his Uncle Mark's house, Alex overheard a suspicious conversation. Mark was speaking on the phone in low tones, talking about a shipment and moving targets. Alex's heart raced as he realized the horrible truth: his uncle was involved in a kidnapping ring. Shocked and unsure of what to do, Alex left, but not before Mark noticed him. Alex was torn. Should he tell his father? He wrestled with the decision, knowing that exposing his uncle's secret could destroy their family. But the danger he was in was too great. Mark knew Alex had overheard, and Alex feared for his safety. As days passed, Alex grew more withdrawn, his mind consumed by the secret he carried. One evening, Alex didn't return home. His parents grew worried, but they assumed he was out with friends. As the hours dragged on, David's concern deepened. He knew something wasn't right. Alex wasn't the type to disappear without notice. Soon, David received the call every parent dreads. Alex had been reported missing. David launched a search, using every resource at his disposal. The entire town of Greenwood rallied around him, combing through forests, streets, and abandoned buildings. Days passed, and the search yielded nothing. David was heartbroken, but determined to find his son. What he didn't know was how close the mystery would lead him. David couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. His mind was consumed with the thought of Alex. He retraced his son's last known steps, interviewing friends and family. That's when he noticed something strange. His brother-in-law, Mark, had been acting unusually nervous. David's instincts told him something was off. While searching near an abandoned factory, David found something that made his blood run cold: a bracelet. It was Alex's. The bracelet was half buried in the dirt, a grim clue that his son had been there. David knew this was no longer a search for a missing boy. It was now a murder investigation. With the bracelet in hand, David knew he had to confront Mark. He could no longer ignore the growing suspicion. When he visited Mark's house, he noticed his brother-in-law was anxious, avoiding eye contact. David's heart pounded as he asked the question he feared most: where is Alex? Under the weight of David's interrogation, Mark broke down. He confessed everything. Alex had overheard him speaking to a kidnapper, and Mark couldn't let him expose their operation. "I had no choice," Mark said coldly. He would have ruined everything. David's worst fears were realized. His own brother-in-law had murdered his son. Mark revealed more details, implicating a man named Lucas, a key member of the kidnapping ring. Together, they had been abducting teenagers and selling them in other cities. Alex had become a threat, and Mark eliminated him to keep their operation going. David was stunned, the weight of the betrayal crushing him. Mark confessed that he had taken Alex to the abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, where he murdered him and left his body to decompose. David's heart ached as he pictured his son's final moments, trapped and terrified. He could barely process the horror, but he knew he had to continue the investigation. Despite the emotional toll, David pressed on. He knew there was more to uncover, and Lucas needed to be brought to justice. Using the information Mark provided, David coordinated with other officers to track down Lucas. He couldn't rest until both men were held accountable for Alex's death. The search for Lucas led the authorities to another city. Lucas had gone into hiding, but David was determined. Every lead was followed, every tip investigated. The town of Greenwood watched as the case unfolded, the horror of Alex's murder hanging over the community like a dark cloud. Lucas had taken refuge in a rundown apartment complex. David and his team raided the building, storming through each room. When they finally found Lucas, he tried to flee, but there was no escape. He was arrested and brought back to Greenwood to face justice for his role in the kidnapping ring. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Mark sat expressionless as the charges were read aloud. David, sitting in the front row, felt a wave of anger and sadness. The evidence was overwhelming, but it didn't make the pain any easier. As the prosecution laid out their case, the full extent of Mark's betrayal became clear. Mark's defense team tried to paint him as a man who was forced into the kidnapping ring by Lucas, but the jury wasn't convinced. The cold, calculated nature of Alex's murder weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Mark had made his choices, and now he had to face the consequences. As Lucas took the stand, his involvement in the kidnapping ring became undeniable. He had been the mastermind behind the operation, manipulating people like Mark to do his dirty work. His lack of remorse only fueled the anger in the courtroom. Lucas's fate was sealed. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Both Mark and Lucas were found guilty of all charges, including the murder of Alex. The courtroom erupted in emotion, with David feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but the hole left by Alex's death remained. On sentencing day, the judge handed down life sentences for both Mark and Lucas. There would be no parole, no chance for redemption. The weight of their crimes was too great to allow for any leniency. As the sentence was read, David felt a small sense of closure, knowing that his son's killers would never walk free. David's family struggled to move on after the trial. The loss of Alex was compounded by the betrayal from within their own family. Holidays, once filled with laughter and joy, became somber occasions. They leaned on each other for support, but the scars ran deep. The town of Greenwood also began the long process of healing. Memorials for Alex were set up, and the community came together to support his family. But the sense of security that once defined the town was gone. People were more cautious, more guarded, knowing that evil could lurk anywhere. David spent many nights reflecting on the case and his own role in it. He had always believed in justice, but nothing could prepare him for the emotional toll of investigating his own son's murder. He wrestled with guilt, wondering if he could have done more to protect Alex, but he knew he had done all he could. In time, David found a new purpose in life. He became an advocate for families of crime victims, using his experience to help others navigate the painful process of losing a loved one to violence. It gave him a sense of peace, knowing that he could turn his tragedy into something meaningful. Mark, now serving his life sentence, began to feel the weight of his actions. The cold, calculated decisions he had made came back to haunt him. In letters to David, he expressed regret, but David never responded. For him, Mark's remorse meant nothing in the face of Alex's death. Lucas, however, remained unrepentant. He continued to deny any wrongdoing, even as he spent the rest of his life behind bars. His lack of remorse was a stark contrast to the devastation he had caused. But David found solace in knowing that Lucas would never harm anyone else again. As years passed, Alex's memory lived on in Greenwood. The town established a scholarship in his name, honoring his love of learning and his bright future that had been stolen away. David visited his son's grave regularly, finding comfort in the quiet moments spent remembering the boy he had loved so deeply. Though life would never be the same, David and his family found a way to move forward. The pain of Alex's loss would always be there, but they learned to live with it, finding strength in each other and in the memories of the happy times they shared. Justice had been served, and in time healing began.